Okay, so hopefully you will write this problem down, and then you guys can go ahead and get started on the Google Form quiz. Remember, that is posted in the 1.2 video worksheet title under week 1 in Google Classroom. So go ahead and pause the video here and complete this warm-up problem. I would suggest that you do post a picture just so that I can see your progress with the work as well. So we are going to actually start with multiplying rational expressions. Remember that rational expressions are very similar to just a fraction. Okay, but there's a few things that we have to take care of because instead of just numbers with a fraction, we're actually putting some variables in these as well. So let's look at our next slide. The next slide here has a list of all of the steps for multiplying a rational function. Okay, very similar to multiplying fractions, everything needs to be in factored form. So that means everything is being multiplied together. You need to list your excluded values. When you're multiplying fractions together, or rational functions together, you will have more than one fraction. So you need to list everything that's in the denominator for all fractions included. To make sure that you include all the values where you could get 0 on the denominator. Once you list your excluded values, then you can cancel out any factors from the numerator and denominator. They don't have to be the numerator and denominator for just that specific fraction. It could be numerators and denominators across the fractions. That's totally fine. Once you cancel out all the factors, you multiply whatever's left on the numerator together. If nothing is left on the numerator, then it's just 1. When you cancel something out, what you're doing is dividing. And if you divide anything and cancel everything out, you're just left with 1. You are not left with 0. Okay, so make sure to make a note of that. When you cancel everything out, if there's nothing left, it's 1. Then you're going to multiply the denominators together. Your last step is to simplify and list any excluded values just to give you your final answer. So we're going to take a look at an example problem. If you need to pause the video here so you can write all the steps down in your notes so that you can go back and reference them, that'd be a good idea. For your example, we have 2 fractions, okay, 2 rational expressions here, or rational functions, because they have variables included. Our second fraction there is already in factored form. Everything's already being multiplied together. But our first one is not, so we need to get this into factored form. So I'm going to factor out a 3 from everything on the numerator. That leaves me with x squared minus 7x minus 8. Okay, that's your first rule for factoring, is factoring out a GCF. If you don't remember factoring, go back into Google Classroom and watch all the intro videos and some of the factoring review. Then I need to factor this x squared minus 7x minus 8 again. Okay, I'm seeing what numbers multiply to negative 8. Just going to do some work here on the side and add up to a negative 7. So this would be a negative 8, and a positive 1. That will add up to negative 7. So my factors would be 3, x minus 8, x plus 1. So that's everything in factored form. Okay, then my denominator here is a difference of perfect squares, so I can take the square root of the first, square root of the second. One of my factors is positive, one of them is negative. Okay, so I'm going to write these again in factored form just so it's a little bit clearer. So I have for my first one 3 times x minus 8, x plus 1 over x plus 4, x minus 4 times x minus 2, x minus 4 over 3 times x minus 1. Now I need to list my excluded values, so that's anywhere on the denominator. I have 3 different things where x could give me 0 on the denominator. So my excluded values would be when x plus 4 equals 0, when x minus 4 equals 0, and when x minus 1 equals 0. I don't really care about this 3 because it doesn't have a variable attached with it. If it was a 3x, then I would care about it. But for right now, it's just a number. It doesn't matter for an excluded value. We're going to solve all of these for x. So I have 3 excluded values. Now that I have that, I can move on to step number 3, which is to cancel out any factors. I can cancel across my numerators and across my denominators. So I have a 3 that I can cancel out. Let me use a different colored pen. Cancel out the 3 here, cancels out with this 3. I don't have anything to cancel out my x minus 8. Can't cancel out my x plus 1. Can't cancel out the x minus 2, but I can cancel out this x minus 4. So that is all that I can cancel out. Now I'm going to go ahead and multiply across the numerator. Typically when we multiply across, we're just going to leave it in factored form. So I'm just going to keep the parenthesis with it. So x minus 8, x plus 1, and x minus 2 over x plus 4 and x minus 1. That's as simplified as you can get for this rational expression. We do need to include that x can't equal -4, 4, or 1. That would be your final answer. Okay, so that is multiplying fractions. Again, if you need to pause this to write down anything, that's fine. Take the time to do that. The next type of fractions that we're going to look at are dividing fractions. Very similar to what you are doing with multiplying fractions. There's just a step beforehand. So you need to multiply by the reciprocal. If you don't remember what reciprocal is, 2 would be your 1. Your reciprocal of 2 would be 1/2. Okay, reciprocal just means that you flip the fraction. Another example, let's say you have 3/2. Your reciprocal for that would be 2 over 3. Okay, you just are flipping those. So when you are multiplying by rational expressions, you're fine to do the steps that we just did. When you're dividing, you need to multiply by the reciprocal. So that means there's going to be some type of a flip with a fraction going on. Okay, so that means that you change the sign to the division sign to multiplication. Then you flip the numerator and denominator of the second fraction. Once you do that, you're good to go ahead and follow the exact same steps that we just had for the multiplying rationals. So if I have this example here of 2x over y divided by x over y, the very first thing that I'm going to do is you keep your very first fraction the same. You don't touch that one. Then it says that I'm going to change the division sign to multiplication. So this becomes a times, or multiplying. And then I'm going to flip the numerator and denominator of the second fraction. So I'm flipping y and x. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow the steps for multiplying rationals. They're already in factored form. Everything's being multiplied. X can't equal 0 and y can't equal 0. Sorry, I threw another variable at you guys for right now. And then you're going to go ahead and cancel any terms from your numerator and denominator. So my x's will cancel, my y's will cancel, and that's it. So now I'm going to multiply across. I have just 2 on my numerator. If everything cancels out on your denominator, you are left with 1. So I have 2 over 1, which just simplifies to 2. And then I do need to include that x can't equal 0, y can't equal 0. Okay, pretty basic, just reciprocal practice. But let's look at one that's a little bit more challenging. So here we are dividing. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this dividing into a multiplication type problem. So my very first fraction stays the same. I'm going to change my division sign to multiplication, and then I flip my entire second fraction. Now that it's multiplying, I can go ahead and do the same steps for multiplying rational expressions. So I need to factor. I'm going to write my factoring above. X times x minus 3, factoring out a GCF. Here I would need to do the splitting apart method. So this one would give me seeing what numbers multiply to 12 and add up to a negative 13. Negative 1 and negative 12. Actually, I'm going to delete that because we don't need that. Okay, split those apart. I can take out my x, so 2x. You got a negative 1. So I have 2x minus 1 and x minus 6. For my denominator over here, I can take out an x, so I'm left with an x squared plus 4. And then I can factor this into an x minus 6 and an x minus 6. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this so that it's a little bit neater. Okay, those are all my steps for factoring. Okay, so I just rewrote those fractions so that's clearer for what my factors are. Now I need to list all of my excluded values. So I have 4 different cases here. 2x minus 1 equals 0, x minus 6 equals 0, x equals 0, and x squared plus 4 equals 0. So I need to solve for x, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I solved all of my factors for x. I got 1/2, 6, and 0 that x can't equal. For my last one, when I go to solve for x, I would be taking the square root of a negative number, and I can't do that. So that one doesn't count. So now I am allowed to go back to my fraction and cancel out any terms from numerators and denominators. So I can cancel out my x minus 3, can cancel out my x. Then I'm just going to rewrite by multiplying across. I have x minus 3 times x minus 6 over 2x minus 1 times x squared plus 4. And then I need to include my excluded values. X can't equal 0, 1/2, or 6. Sorry for that writing. Okay, so go and try some of these practice problems. Make sure you practice them on your own. If you're feeling confident, then you can go ahead and there will be a worksheet posted in Google Classroom. Try some of the problems. You do not need to try all of them. We will definitely do some more practice with this stuff beginning of next week before we start to move on to some new concepts. Okay, I know I kind of threw a lot of new concepts at you this week, so next week I'll try to lighten that up a little bit for you. Enjoy the rest of your week. You can log on Thursday for any Google Hangouts if you need, but try some problems beforehand and then come with any questions. Hope you have a great rest of your week.